Welcome to the Jobs and Work podcast. If you're like most Americans, you spend a significant amount of your time working. In fact, we spend more time at our jobs than anywhere else. But how often do we really talk about work in America? On this podcast, the Work for Change team will. Work for Change, LLC is a team of social scientists, thought leaders, and digital storytellers who dig into the critical issues affecting American workers and workplaces today. Our podcast is co-hosted by Dr. Kendra Jason and myself, Dr. Chris Maycumber. We'll also bring guests onto the show who reflect the diversity of the American workforce. We are so excited for you to join us as we lead the efforts to humanize the workplace by building dignity and equity into jobs, work, and organizations. Please subscribe to the podcast and share us with your friends and family. You can learn more about Work for Change at workforchangellc.com. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Jobs and Work podcast. This is where we talk about all things related to jobs and work. This is episode number 25, and I'm your co-host, Chris Maycumber.
And I'm co-host Kendra Jason. And today we have special guest Travis Jones. Welcome to the show, Travis.
Welcome.
Thank you all for having me. I have to say I'm excited to be in conversation with sociologists again. I had to get that off my chest at the beginning, but I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, thanks.
So today we're going to talk to Travis, who is an author, speaker, and educator who really believes in the power of play. And we're going to talk about that more in a little bit to help us really reimagine ourselves and our world. Very much a sociologist, Travis. Travis has a BA in philosophy, a MA in sociology, and also a Master's of Divinity degree. And he's published on things such as the sociology of time, transformational leadership, cultural competency, race, religion, and human flourishing. So we have Travis on the show today because he is an organizational consultant in addition to all of these things. And what he does is he leverages his research from humanities and social sciences to inform content design, facilitation, coaching, and keynotes, and the consulting specialties that he does. So we're really excited to have Travis on the show. One thing I would like to start with, Travis, is that you recently did a TEDx talk called Bad White People, which really explores how white people can be better anti-racist by being rebellious against those false promises of white supremacy. So can you just start by, letting us know a little bit more what that means for our viewers?
Yeah, so there's probably a backstory I could share. After the talk was published by the kind of TED Corporation, the powers that be, they actually changed that title. So even Bad White People sometimes puts people off. The long story short is that I kind of petitioned to keep Bad White People, not only as kind of a creative spin on rebellion and kind of good troublemaking, but because, in that talk, what I was trying to do was draw on some of the influences that James Baldwin had on me. Probably several years before that, I was somewhat of a latecomer to James Baldwin, but I was trying to, in the talk, almost talk about anti-racism or white supremacy through kind of this moral or existential paradigm, that it's it's deeper than people getting the facts and figures wrong about racism. And I feel like I as a first-time reader of Baldwin, that really connected with me. So that entire talk was me really trying to kind of draw from what I'd been reading and learning about anti-racism and different manifestations of white supremacy, and make it kind of connect using that classroom metaphor.
Mm-hmm. And what type of response have you gotten since you've done it?
Well, so it's interesting, like in the business corporate world and some of the organizational consulting I do, it's hit or miss. So some people are like, I really love that. It was really new and different, engaging. They liked that, there was kind of this, I don't know if boldness is the right word, but
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't as academic, I think, as a lot of anti-racist education is out there. And that was why I appreciated the TED space. There's been other clients who have seen the talk and, they were like, Travis isn't going to fit with our, workplace culture. That's not really our style. And locally, the organizers had to deal with a little pushback from white folks in Charlotte who didn't read the description, but just saw bad white people and like, how dare you put up someone on the stage who's even talking about this good, bad binary, which of course is not really what I'm doing, but so it's been mixed in terms of like the reception, I think.
Interesting. So Travis, how did you get into anti-racism work? Was this something that occurred in college, or does it predate college?
So I always tell people, for me, like probably personally first, then professionally, or some kind of mix of both. I claim Charlotte as home, but I grew up in a pretty small rural town, about 20, 30 minutes away from Charlotte. And it was, predominantly white neighborhoods, churches, schools. So I didn't do a lot of thinking about, like lots of white people, right? Who were socialized not to, be aware of these things in my own life and in the world for, until early adulthood, I'd say. And even then, a lot of my kind of like race consciousness, raising was probably more of like a liberal form of, I want to be a good, accepting, kind of compassionate person. The real anti-racism probably came from starting teaching sociology as a learner and teacher. And I'm thankful for my journey, because I got a lot of it from like introducing students to Marx and kind of a class analysis of the world. And so, those are hard pills to swallow, especially for a lot of my working class, students. And so for me, racism was always tied up with kind of classism and exploitation. And, I know a lot of people take different paths into this work, and sometimes I'm like, counting my blessings that my path was a little different. And I got into this kind of holding on to both of those. But so anyway, to really answer your question, being connected to white family members, white friends, doing a lot of traveling around the world and seeing how white supremacy and racism is not just a Southern North Carolina rural country thing. It's everywhere, and it's global. It's in our policies. It's in our culture. So I'd say, and then professionally, probably the last 10 years, really doing D&I consulting, and then more recently, more anti-racist education.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, what encouraged you to move not just your scholarship, but your work out of the classroom into corporate spaces or institutional spaces? Because we know, like, Chris and I know it's almost like we're kind of protected in the university. We're free to have these ideas, we're teaching, we have the aha moments, and then we can go home. But when you step outside of the university and take this into the quote unquote real world, you're opening up a whole nother can of worms. And so what encouraged you to take that, that step, into organizational consulting? And then, if you would add to that, like what makes you special? Like what's your niche? What's your hook? Since there are a lot of organizational consultants out there.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I could probably tell the story of how the choices were made for me. Like the sociologist in me is like, the academic labor market is brutal, So some of that I was experiencing. So I was a full-time sociology instructor at a local community college in North Carolina. Loved teaching, totally changed my life. And so was dead set on like a tenure track, career. Went to a PhD program. So I left kind of teaching full time. I was in the PhD program at UNC Charlotte for a couple of years. And in that time, paying attention to what was happening in academia, but also feeling a real, I loved my students, as always, and still always tugs at me about what might that previous life have looked like. But equally, I've always loved the world of work, being a working class person, being a first generation college student. I was selling cell phones at Verizon when I was in grad school, and I always worked through school and worked construction jobs. And some of my best relationships were with people at work. And hardest times too. But so I missed that. Like I wanted to be in, this is hard, right? Because I love the university, so I don't it's not an either or for me.
Right.
But I did miss kind of being in people's daily lives and connected to that. I've always been fascinated about what people do for a living, what they're connected with. And, the market is flooded with academics and intellectuals. And I just felt like, I might be able to be a different kind of voice in the workplace, really aligning with you all's values, like that kind of humanism.
Right.
That, and then I got really fortunate to meet the right people at the right time who were doing D&I work. And I can definitely say more about them because I give, like Mary Frances Winters, familiar with her work at the Winters Group, kind of took me under her wing. And so she's kind of a pillar in this space that I learned along the way. And so here I found this like niche, what I thought at the time niche, D&I space where you could do sociology.
Right.
At least to some degree, right? So I felt like I found a good fit. It took several years to kind of shake whether I was going to go back and try to finish the PhD or not. But I feel pretty good about this path and kind of seeing where it takes me.
Sounds like it's all fitting together for you, Travis. So we are interested in hearing more about your work with play. That seems to be your current focus and how you're bringing play into your consulting. So can you share with us what that means and what that looks like?
Yeah. So the play, and I would say I'm really interested in what I've been calling socially responsible work. And I'm trying to see if anybody out there is kind of using that exact language. I'm sure people are talking about job quality and workplace conditions, like through other frameworks. So the play stuff came out of my interest in like, what does good, meaningful, fulfilling work look like?
Right.
And some of that interest came from all these sessions and all these workshops and talks doing D&I work, which were great. I was hearing lots of people's stories and reflections on their identities, their perceptions about the world and their race analysis or lack thereof. So there's a lot of stuff in people's minds. And at some point along the way, I was like, I've been doing this work for so long, and I almost never hear what people actually do in their day-to-day. So that started this journey of just like being really interested in the actual task, the actual process, the actual expertise that people have at work. So that's kind of where I was, digging into like workplace stress and some of the stuff that causes that. So the play stuff came from, thinking about play beside work and kind of how they overlap. So in an ideal world, work is fulfilling. You find meaning in it. You kind of, self-actualize and create a sense of self through, implementing your expertise. And play similarly is, those all kinds of activities that we do as people, where we are at our most free, creative selves. So a couple of years ago, I went and got a formal certification. I don't know if you all are familiar with Lego Serious Play. So I got like I'm an instructor of Lego Serious Play, and their entire philosophy is just around using experiential learning, getting people kind of outside of their heads. And they always say thinking with your hands. So it's relatively new work, which is why I'm excited about it. But, in that workshop, I'll never forget, they took pictures of us kind of behind the scenes. And at the end of the conference, they put up our pictures and just showed images of everybody kind of smiling and engaged and focused on building these models with the Lego bricks. And I'll never forget the facilitator saying, like, how often do you see this kind of playfulness and joy and just kind of being absorbed at work, right? And so I'm just kind of trying to be playful in my consulting to see if I can inject some of that in people's work lives. So
how are people responding to that? Like most people are, when they hire a consultant, might not, well, they're hiring you for that reason, right? If they know that's what you're doing, maybe the leadership team is bringing you in to integrate play into the workspace. How do the employees respond typically?
So I'll be really honest, this is really new. I'm right now in a conversation with a client to use some of this play in a coaching project. And so I was just really honest with them. I was like, I know, at least from my experience, I'm not seeing a lot of play and play studies research being incorporated. So I'm totally fine with being boutique or niche or something like that. And they were really excited about it. So I'm going to try to marry the coaching conversation with some experiential activities, hopefully aligning with what people do in their own lives to kind of play and, whether that's hiking or meditating or, athletic activities, things like that. So the Lego Serious Play, that's been around for quite a while. So I think folks are a little kind of used to using that as a methodology. But then I go back and say, the TED Talk, the more that I've thought about it, was kind of using the bully and the hall monitor and the class clown, metaphors was kind of my way of being playful with a deadly serious topic, right? So I guess it's been part of my work maybe for some time, because I do try to use humor, which is a hard balance, but I think it's important, in teaching and in this work too. So we'll see where it takes me. It's pretty new. I'm doing a lot of work trying to brainstorm what workshops might look like, the coaching process and that kind of thing.
What this conversation reminds me of something I really enjoy about work is that, you come in as an individual, or like Chris and I, we come in as a team and you kind of shock their system a little bit, right? It's I would say is joyful, to, get them out of the regular routine. It's not a regular meeting. It's not a regular training, that, you have someone who's coming from the outside to not just offer a perspective, but to do things differently. And in that, what I know is that you show them the possibilities if they just do things differently, because they just everybody kind of gets in the mode of routine, the status quo, and it gets mundane. One thing Chris and I really reiterate in our trainings is that, you got to build the time and space for these creative projects. You have to build time and space to do this type of thinking, this type of brainstorming, this type of sharing, this type of gaming, whatever it is. And that's no fun for management in some sense, because it's like, in a sense, it's another thing for them to do. But to your point, what we get is a lot of excitement that, wow, we can have fun and we can do something different and it still work. It's like, oh, this it's not anything out of the weekend. It's still work, and we're doing it in a way that is moving us forward and is progressive in a way, whatever those organizational goals are. We did want to ask you about transformational leadership. That was one of your specialties. So can you let us know what that is and how you approach that topic?
Yeah, so that comes from one of the, which I don't have many at all, publications that I wrote a paper on transformational leadership. And if folks are familiar with the literature, it's kind of one of those old original paradigms, I think probably, decades old now at this point. And a lot of the serious kind of leadership scholars have kind of left it away because it's hard to measure actual change. There's all these new paradigms. Lots of people would argue like too many about what leadership is and what it looks like. So in that paper, which is really more academic than practical, but I still use some of that thought. I was just taking seriously, how do people change? I told you all I'm a new dad. I'm going through this, I don't know about identity crisis, but like a whole new paradigm shift of my world being turned upside down. And so I'm in the middle of some real deep, kind of changes in my life. And so then I just add on to, well, because for me, we're all leaders, and we all have, leadership, traits and capabilities. And so then what is an influential person in your life? That's kind of the way I think about leaders broadly. Play in helping you transform and change. So I think about that when I'm developing talks. I don't just want to be an educator giving people information. I really want to create experiences like so many educators did for me, of those aha moments, of those kind of paradigm shifts. Same thing in my workshops. And also why I'm drawn to the play and the experience stuff is I think, we're not just walking like, information calculators or something. We've got to feel kind of what we're after.
How do you see the racial equity work integrating with play? Like, is that something that you are uniting, or is that separate for you in the consulting?
So it's funny you said that, because just last night I bumped up into this organization, Playgrounds for Palestine. And Mark Lamont Hill has I think a new book on something about Palestinian rights or something. And I saw that all the proceeds go to this organization that is using play, like almost everything in life, right? If we look at human flourishing, who gets access to, opportunities to be creative and to free play and all that. So it's absolutely something I'm wanting to incorporate in this. When I think about play and work, some of my stuff about socially responsible work is really thinking seriously about, in organizations, who in the hierarchy, who gets to do the creative kind of autonomy, making decisions, using their expertise in the organization, and then who's doing the mundane, kind of, robotic, toxic, sometimes stress-inducing work where you don't have a lot of choices. And so that's kind of the way I'm thinking about, using play to say, shouldn't everybody have, opportunities to inject their own personality in their work, make their own decisions about what the tasks look like, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, I think any effort that is expanding the way we think about work and what the workplace can be for us, right? And so I feel like play is adding to that charge of saying we can reimagine what work is and can be, and what the workplace can feel like, and how we can feel as workers. So I'm really excited to see where the play goes, the play work goes. And it's kind of neat to also be in the trailblazing part of it, where you don't have this like depth of research and practice already there, where you can kind of be a part of shaping that, which I think is pretty exciting too.
Yeah, no, I think so too. So my mom's organization, she works at TIAA here in Charlotte, and they've implemented like wellness hours now out of COVID and virtual. And so I've been thinking about that as an opportunity, as well as people's well-being. So even if I can't do the challenging work of connecting it to your workplace goals, which I think you can make that case, more and more thinking about people's life outside of work, and, kind of rewarding that as well.
Yeah, so I'm just really so pleased to see. So I've been following Travis's work for a number of years. Travis is on LinkedIn. You can find his contact information below, so that if you want to contact him for some organizational consulting, if you're interested in play, if you're interested in this idea of being socially responsible, or any other ideas, then you can, of course, find Travis's information below. I'm really so pleased, of course, with how much our work is aligned, right? And thinking about really just wanting to make these workplace experiences better for everyone, and how we really have to disentangle inequality and autonomy and power dynamics in order to do that. And it's not going in and throwing daggers at leadership or management or anything in that sort. It's really just taking a step back and saying, hey, there are some differences across the board. How can we alleviate some of those differences so that everyone can have a better workplace experiences, even managers, right? And so I just really appreciate the work that you're doing. Like Chris said, it really is trailblazing work. I would like us to talk more about the social responsibility. I think there's some great crossover that your consultancy with Work for Change can definitely push that framework forward. So speaking of, if you would like to contact Work for Change, we also do organizational consulting. As Travis said, we really focus on equity, humanity, dignity, communication, transformation. Our information is below. You can find us at work4changellc.com. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and of course, you found us here on YouTube. So please like, subscribe, and share so we can work to make the world of work better.